Now, while South Africa's political parties go about government formation post the election, over in South Asia, India had nearly 1 billion voters. Even with this number of voters at the polls, it resulted in a coalition government with Narendra Modi being sworn in as Prime Minister for a third consecutive term. Milton Nkosi, who's Senior Research Fellow of Africa-Asia Dialogues and former Africa Editor and South Asia Bureau Chief at the BBC, joins us with more detail. Milton, an absolute pleasure and a good afternoon to you.
Hello, Noltando. Good to be with you.
Wonderful, Milton. I'm just keen maybe to start off by reflecting on the overall mood there in India as, of course, this election has taken place. Nearly 1 billion people took to polls, or were registered to take to polls, rather, actually.
Yes, I mean, India is known as the largest democracy on earth. It has a voting pattern that goes over weeks. I mean, we voted on the 29th of May in one day. Of course, we had those special votes and the votes from international bases outside South Africa. But by and large, we were a much smaller operation compared to what the Indians had to go through. They voted over a 7-stage voting period, over weeks and weeks of voting. And just take this fact alone, Noltando, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, in the northern part of India, the population of that state alone is just over 250 million people. Now, you can start to count what the logistics are if you compared to our queues here on the 29th of May that we were so excited about, seeing queues snaking in Soweto, in eThekwini, and we thought those were huge numbers. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi was sworn in yesterday on Sunday in the capital, Delhi. And it was there, the presidential palace, and there were about 2,500 police, very strong security. And his party won 240 seats, much lower, almost like the ANC actually, much lower than he had promised to win. He had promised to win 370 seats or even 390 during his campaign trail. He was boasting that he will get those numbers. But in the previous election, he had gotten something like 303. So he was confident, but he was brought down to 240. And he's been helped, quite like the ANC again, I might add, because it's so relevant in our current political climate. He was helped by the coalition partners to bring him over the required number to be in the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of parliament in Delhi.
Very interesting there. I want to speak, Milton, about that shift. Of course, if the Prime Minister was so confident during the election trail and really falling so much lower than that expectations of 370 to 390, what exactly happened? What were the people of India looking for that they were not quite finding in the PM? What has he gotten right and what could he still be doing better?
So Narendra Modi came in almost quite like Donald Trump in America, is a cult figure, very charismatic, speaks well, draws millions of crowds into his rallies. He is a charismatic character. And so by virtue of his business policy, he brought the Indian economy to easy heights, if you like. They had grown so well in the economy that people thought that he's the man to keep. And now he's broken the record by being only the second prime minister to have a third term post the founding fathers of Indian democracy in 1947. So he is very much credited for growing the Indian economy. In fact, he's promising young people in India that he's going to build $1 trillion economy.
Very interesting indeed. Let's talk about the coalition dynamics there in India, of course. Milton, any as complex as what we have here at home, or maybe a smoother process for the PM and his team?
So what Narendra Modi did, which is what the opposition here in South Africa tried to do with the MPC, the multi-party coalition, he had already aligned some of the coalition partners. Remember, during the election campaign here, pretty much all the political parties were saying, no, we're going for a win. We're going to take all the votes. We are not talking about coalitions. And of course, we now know what happened. Everybody has got egg on their face. They're now making frantic phone calls to try and get coalition partners. Whereas Narendra Modi was pretty smart. He said, if I don't get over that threshold, let me get some coalition partners lined up. And that's why he was sworn in yesterday, because the process was so quick. He actually reduced the negotiation process, which we are going through right now. Imagine if the ANC, the DA, well, the DA formed the MPC, so they were almost there. Sadly, they didn't have the numbers that they had envisaged. But imagine if the ANC, which is the leading party in the election votes, because they got 40% more than anybody else. Imagine if they'd negotiated before the election date and said to partners, look, if we don't get over 50, can you come with us? Because now all they needed to do would be to call their partners and say, are you still in? Let's go. Then this whole period would have been shrunk, and the uncertainty in the markets would have been resolved pretty quickly, in my view. So I think that what Narendra Modi did in India was actually closing that gap. So he negotiated the coalition agreements, if you like, and said, listen, if I don't get on, you come with me. And now the NDA came on with him, the national coalition that he had built, and they've shot him up, even though he had come very, very low. He got punished in many ways for his how shall I put it, populist views. You know, Indians are very pluralistic in their approach. They encompass everyone. Never forget that fact, Noltando, that India has the world's second largest Muslim population, which is around 200 million plus. So the Indian voter decided that we don't like these extreme right, almost sort of right-wing politics that Narendra Modi represents, because he's very much sort of a Hindu cult figure in many parts of his constituency. But people in India want a moderate government. They think that if we rule moderately, then we'll do well. In fact, when the economy really shot up a few years ago, remember, India has already had a coalition government, Nolutando, since 1989. So this is not new for them. They've already had a governing structure through coalitions, and the economy grew much faster under coalition governments than when they had the majority government.
This is very interesting, because it also does tell me that there's lots to learn from, you know, the maturity there in India. I also want to speak about just that fast-growing economy there. We know that Prime Minister Modi has spoken about moving India from being a developing nation to a developed one. It really sounds good. And in fact, the growth prospects for India are pretty strong there, even with, of course, the pushback on some of the populist ideas that he has. Is he the guy for that economy? Could it really reach new heights? Him considering his track record as well.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, one of the things that he did, I mean, you know, poor Cyril Ramaphosa, who's now battling to get coalition partners, didn't do when Narendra Modi was dispersing government programs like grains of bags of grains to poor communities in the far-flung parts of India. There's a state called Bihar, which is the poorest state in India. When he was distributing those bags, they had Modi's face on them. Vaccine programs had Modi's sort of charismatic smile on them. So he used those tactics to try and garner more, and he outspent the opposition on the advertising revenue. So he really went for it. The fact that he still came down shows you how the Indian voter decided that, no, we don't want to go that much. There are 28 states in India. I mean, we have 9 provinces, so you can tell the the scale there. You can never stop to marvel at the size of the logistical operation that they had to do. But what they did is that they credited him for growing the economy, but they punished him for being a little bit too overzealous on clamping down on democratic values, on institutions, because, he went to Ayodhya in the northeast of the country to unveil and inaugurate that big temple just a few weeks before voting. You would recall the amazing pictures when he went at the site where a mosque had been demolished. So the Indian voter is saying, well, we like the way you grow the economy, but we're not so sure about how you treat younger or smaller populations like the Muslim population in India.
Very interesting indeed to see voters really moving with their feet, or citizens voting with their feet, Milton. I also want to speak about India's perspective globally here. We know that, of course, it's a big part of BRICS there, but also India's been very good at kind of negotiating itself through the rest of the globe. And I'm wondering also just about that as a win for India here, and even Modi's government moving forward, the ability to leverage relationships with the United States while, being able to hold partnerships with the likes of China and Russia. It's been a very interesting one to watch.
So India globally is really, really hitting the right notes. There is no European leader who hasn't been recently. Everyone wants that market, those hundreds of millions of Indians who are now becoming and joining the middle class. I used to live in Delhi, Noltando, and I saw how the Indian economy just exploded in a short space of time when I was there. The size of the airport had sort of not just doubled, it was quadrupled in size, the Indira Gandhi International Airport. So the connection with the rest of the world, it's trading with China, it's trading with the United States, and we know here in Africa, you see a lot of Mahindra vans driving there, Tata cars are all over the place. And you know that in America, the Silicon Valley, most of those people who are running Google, Apple are all of Indian descent. So you can tell that India's sort of contribution to the world's economy is very, very clear and confident. And I think that India is also building its own Silicon Valley, because they've gone so much ahead technologically in places like Pune and Bangalore. They're doing incredibly well. I mean, the most literate state in India, Kerala in the southwest, that population has got direct flights from most of the Middle Eastern states, because that population is what the Gulf states are using as their workforce.
Very interesting. Milton, it's all we have time for today. I'd like to thank you for helping us reflect on this one. It's been very, very fascinating to learn. Thank you. That was Milton Nkosi, Senior Research Fellow of Africa-Asia Dialogues and former Africa Editor and South Asia Bureau Chief at the BBC.